An instructional video by Jace Consulting Group. All right, in this installment, we're going to talk some more about the health check. This is continuing on from part 2 of the general health check and how to read it and what all these headers mean and how you can use them to troubleshoot your site. So we'll start on the right-hand side here where it says cells and then move on down the line. But obviously you can see cells just gives you the eNode B identifier that you're working on, the technology, which in this case is 2100, the sector, and the carrier layer here. This is good information to know so you know which technology and sector you're looking at, and this is where you want to start when you're looking for what technology you have wrong. For instance, if we're troubleshooting this disabled radio on 2100 alpha, we want to make sure that we're following this data point throughout the health check. It's something that we can, in the other video, we talked about the control find function, which is control F on your keyboard, and then you can go ahead and search in the block for the occurrences of this particular number in your health check document and find it and find more information about that node. Moving along, the administrative state. So you're going to see this in two different ways. You'll see it as locked or unlocked, basically. There are some more things that can go here, but for the most part, for your particular needs, you're going to look and see if it's locked or unlocked. The administrative state is set by either you as the technician through NFSD, but also through QuadGen or Amdocs or whatever controller you're using. They can put the administrative state into a locked state, which basically just locks that node or sector on that node down and refuses to let it take traffic, right? Availability status, you should not have an availability status if your node is up and running, enabled, and taking traffic. If there's a problem, for instance, dependency fail, right? 1056 dependency fail, just basically dependency fail in this case in the availability status column here is just telling us that there's something that the system depends on in order to work properly is not lined up, right? It's probably a fiber or probably some sort of information gathering tool like fiber. Availability status could mean something else, could be a SFP card or something like that, but most of the time we're going to start with the fiber pathway on a dependency fail. But you can check in availability status to see if your site or if your the node you're talking about has availability. If it says no status, then you're good. Cell barred. So this is a setting. If you put your technology on air, but they want to run live frequency through it, but they don't want to actually take calls, they might put it in barred. You might see this as barred, right? It'll just say barred right here, which basically means that the radio's unlocked, it's enabled, but the internal systems are barring it from actually taking traffic from the end user, right, on the ground, so that the system is protected against lost calls and so on, because if it's not ready to be used, then a call will try to come in on that frequency but can't. The phone does not recognize whether or not the frequency is active or able to be used. It just looks for the carrier signal. If it finds it, it will try to lock onto it. So if you see this as barred, but you're actually trying to turn the frequency up, that could be a problem. You might have issues. You might see blank RSSI readings, blank VISWA readings, where there's nothing showing there. If that's marked barred, you're going to see that. It's not actually picking up on those readings. Downlink channel bandwidth, you really don't need to worry about that, but basically this is just giving you, it's kind of a, you really don't need to worry about it, but just so you know, it's how they offset the bandwidth, right? So it's the number of channels the bandwidth can withstand inside these next two readings right here, which is going to be evolved, this EARFCNDL. Another couple of numbers you really don't need to focus on very much, but evolved ultra absolute radio frequency channel number, right? So these two right here are actually what frequency range that 2100 bandwidth is being split up in, right? It's the way that they divide the frequency up to give it more bandwidth than it actually has. Operational state, this right here is very important. Your operational state for radios that you install and turn on should be enabled. If it's disabled, there's a problem. It doesn't get disabled. This operational state is not determined by any kind of person. This operational state is determined by the computer itself inside the radio. So if you see it disabled in the operational state, it's because there's a problem somewhere with the system and it cannot enable it, right? Now, if it's disabled and you haven't refreshed or rebooted the node since you've troubleshot the issue, it may not come in as enabled. That is something that the controller, Quadgen or Amdocs or somebody, needs to ask the system to do. They can request that it be enabled, and then it will enable itself. So check your operational state along with your administrative state and make sure those two things are matching up: enabled and unlocked and not barred. If you have enabled, not barred, and unlocked, and you still can't get traffic or readings on your site, then you can investigate further into the problem. But check these first, obviously. So LMN, you really don't need to worry about that either, but Public LAN Mobile Network is what that stands for. And these are all false because none of these are public LAN mobile networks. That's a different classification of service, basically where the end user is responsible for selecting the carrier signal that this call is going to work on. But none of these are configured for that. None of yours are going to be configured for that, most likely. Sector carrier reference, you really don't need to pay attention to that very much, and you really don't need to pay attention to the uplink channel bandwidth. Those aren't things that are going to be affected by any of the work that you're doing. Those are more, all this PLMN, the carrier reference, and the uplink channel bandwidth, and the frequency channel number, downlink and uplink numbers. Those are all set by scripters, and if there's issues there, they're going to notice it on your health check. So that's basically how to use your cell status information to work through any kind of problem you might have on your health check. And these are all controlled by the controller, right? Except for, obviously, administrative state. You can control that through NFSD, but you can't disable a radio through NFSD, right? That's not something you can do, right? But you can lock it. But if you see differences in enabled or disabled, or locked and unlocked, or barred and not barred, or availability status as dependency fail, or inconsistent configuration issues in these availability statuses, then you can use that information to further look into the problem that you have.